Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the PM Forum webinar. I'm Rachel Kelly, I'm the Northwest Chair. I'm delighted to be hosting today's session. It's the first Northwest webinar we've held so far since we started the virtual sessions. It's great to have so many of you with us. It's great to see many of you joining now. We're hoping to get up into that sort of 100 attendees, so a big warm welcome and thank you very much for joining us. I know a lot of you will be very busy. There's a lot of pressure on us to be responding to a lot of the market challenges and to be supporting the practices that we're working for. And I know at PwC we're very busy at this time and getting the opportunity to work on some different activities that perhaps we might not have done sort of pre-COVID-19. I also hope you're all keeping safe and well, and that you do get the opportunity to enjoy some of the nice weather, because I know lots of us are having to juggle caring for family members, homeschooling and all of that good fun. So do hope you're taking care of yourself and get to enjoy some of the good weather. So I'm delighted today to be joined by Nick Golding. He's a director of GoldSand Digital. They're a content marketing agency based in London with clients throughout the UK. And in today's session, Nick's going to talk around harnessing automation for content marketing. Now, I think we'll all be at very different stages of our marketing automation adoption or journey. So over the next 45 minutes, Nick's going to talk to us around what marketing automation is and the importance of it, the importance of quality content, and especially during a crisis, so much content out there. How do we get the right content for our audiences? He's going to talk through a couple of examples and case studies of where he's been working with Jaguar and Salesforce, and then touch on some of the automation tools that are available, including with measuring meaningful ROI when it comes to marketing automation. We'll be asking a couple of polls during the session, so do look out for those as they pop up and click and interact with those. If you've got any questions for Nick, you can share your questions. If you see at the bottom of the screen the Q&A option, if you post your question there, and I'll pick those up in the Q&A we're planning to run at the end of the session for around 5 to 10 minutes. If you're having any technical issues, there's a chat box there as well, so a chat feature, so please do post to that, and Nadia from PM Forum is thankfully supporting it and managing those requests. But I think that's everything from me. Enjoy the session, and over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Rachel. And good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be speaking with you all today. Since the lockdown started, we've been talking to marketing teams and leadership teams up and down the country to try and find out how they're coping and how they're managing and what impact it's had on content and communication in particular. So some of the businesses we've talked to have said, look, we're actually, from a business perspective, quite relishing this opportunity because we've had a bit more freedom of time, and we're able to look at some of the processes and practices that we've employed in the past and look if there's better and slicker ways we can operate. Others have said we're totally run off our feet, we haven't got time to breathe, we're doing everything we can to keep the bare minimum moving. I totally understand that. And some have said there's no real change. I thought it would be interesting to give you a bit of background to myself and to GoldSand Digital. GoldSand Digital is a content agency. We're based in London, as Rachel said, and we've been exploring relationships between tech and the effectiveness of content within businesses for over 10 years now. We tend to support BD teams and marketing teams primarily, but often we'll try and link the work they're doing with the leadership team as well, and understand the link between frontline content and sort of the core values and vision and mission of the business. We love working with businesses in two fairly distinct ways. The first is around strategy, so determining what high-performing content is for your business, and the second is on production, so delivering on that strategy, supporting marketing teams, BD teams who need that extra resource in terms of content creation and content marketing. So I think in order to understand our passion for this particular topic, I want to just give you a little insight into the journey that we've been on as a content agency. So in 2010, we kicked off, and myself and one other set the business up with a clear vision, certainly, which is to drive businesses forward with content. Lots of ambition, lots of energy, but no real idea of how we were going to do that, if I'm being honest. And today, interestingly, that still is our vision and our ethos, driving businesses forward with content. We were certainly saying all the right things at that point. Within a couple of years, out of nowhere, really, we became embedded in the automotive industry. And when I talk about automotive throughout this presentation, I'm talking about the UK retail automotive sector. So the dealer groups, the retail centres that you see up and down the country that represent household known brands like Jaguar, Land Rover, Volkswagen, BMW. What was really exciting about this space was there was a real need for engaging local content that could help generate inquiries and sales. Whilst these businesses had strong databases, they didn't necessarily have all the tools in place to generate opportunities from them. And I think what was a really interesting stage for us, a bit of a light bulb moment, was within sort of a couple of years of working in automotive, whilst the offer that we had out there for the businesses was to create content and generate opportunities and inquiries and leads, was strong. The process that we employed internally was poor, and it caused a lot of sleepless nights. If I'm being honest, we really struggled as a business to be able to scale. We wanted to take on more business, but every time we took on more business, it just felt like we had to recruit more. So we had to try and find a way to scale our business within automotive, because we had a really well-established product at that point. We had to find a way of scaling that without spending a hell of a lot of money, if I'm being honest. And what we realized was we had to build our own automation platform. And eventually this became an award-winning platform, I'm pleased to say, and it forms part of a wider methodology that we now promote called Swarm. But the actual technology was called Auto Insights. And what it enabled us to do was automate the results end of the process for our clients. So we would share content and then export the results, put them into Excel spreadsheets, and then present them to the client. What this automation tool enabled us to do was effectively pull the results together in real time. It empowered our clients to look at the results and engage with the results a little bit more. And I want to talk about return on investment as we go through this presentation. And one of the ways we found that's really effective at generating that ROI is through communication. So if you can empower those around you within your business to buy into the tools that you're employing and actually use them and buy into the results, the chances are you'll get a wider buy-in from across the organization. That was certainly what we found. So we still love automotive. We still work in automotive, and we've got some excellent clients in automotive, and our product has broadened a little there. But we've pivoted naturally and moved into some different areas. Tech, professional services, finance, and a general B2B we've moved into, which is a really exciting space for us. We feel like any organization where there's a huge amount of knowledge, insight, and expertise within that business is right for us, because we can support those businesses in pulling out some of that interesting information and then share it and present it in the right way to grow the business. And I suppose that transition from, or that pivoting from automotive, put us into a bit more of a strategic space. So I suppose today we think of ourselves as a bit more of a strategic consultancy, and we tend to get pulled into projects earlier on. So we will work with businesses at the start of perhaps a growth project or a launch of a new product, and really help them answer a few questions. So the first might be, what is high-performing content for your business? And that term is going to come up a lot, so I'll make no apologies for that. We talk about it a huge amount in our business and with our clients. So what is high-performing content for your business? What tech can be used to leverage that content? So you start to see we're going to examine that relationship between tech and content. And finally, what's the point of it? Why is it being done? So that could be pipeline growth, profile growth, or sort of top of the funnel lead gen work. So here's a few of the brands that we've worked with over the years. You can see Jaguar Land Rover in there, which we'll talk about in a bit, and Savile Assessment, which is part of Willis Towers Watson. We'll give some insight into them too. So let's take a quick look at automation. Let's give some perspective. So what does automation mean today? What does it mean to us in the marketing and business development world? How is it impacting us? What does it unlock for us? Then we want to look at the role of high-performing content in automation. So how do the two sit side by side? What is high-performing content? How can you recognize it and build on it? I want to make this as practical as possible. So whilst I want to give lots of sort of conceptual advice, I also want to ground it. I always think that's quite useful. So give you some practical examples, and I'm obviously open to questions at the end. So if you don't feel like it's been grounded enough, let's do that at the end. I want to offer up some of the tools you could be using, and the fact of the matter is there are hundreds. We're going to delve into the size of this industry in a short while, but there are hundreds and hundreds of tools, and we can't go through all of them, but we're going to cherry pick a few and take a look at those. And really all through this, I want to be focused on how really you can report on content that you deliver and use the automation tools to show ROI and sort of report that success back to the leadership team. Have we been here before? Yes, I think we probably have. I don't think when you strip it away that automation is a particularly new concept. The idea that technology does something quicker and slicker and more efficiently has been seen before. The picture you can see is obviously taken from the Industrial Revolution. And it's a great example of when technology has been able to do this. It meant that products could be produced in a short space of time, cost less money, and it just made for a far more efficient business. So we've definitely been here before. I don't suppose then it was worth quite as much though. The Salesforce State of the Marketing report, which is a brilliant resource if anyone's looking for some further reading after this, tells us that the industry has actually skyrocketed from a $500 million market to an expected $6.4 billion in 2024, which isn't too far away. So that's a pretty significant growth. 60% of marketing leaders are already using automation platforms in marketing, and a further fifth, or just over a fifth, 21%, plan to start using one. I'm really keen to get some perspective from you all as well, and get a view on where you are on this journey, because I imagine there's a bit of a spread. So what is marketing automation? A digital resource website, which again is really useful, called Smart Insights, gives us this description. And there's one word I would pick out from this that's really important, and that's the word should in the first line. So marketing automation should enable marketers to increase return on investment by delivering more relevant, targeted prospect and customer communications across the customer life cycle. So that's a pretty concise explanation. I think that's fair. For us, there's three clear areas to marketing automation, and three pillars, if you like, that we'll explore as we go through this presentation. The first is tech, and there's no denying this is a tech play. This is a software. This is a piece of software that can make your lives, if used in the right way, easier. It can minimize the complexity of process. It enables you to scale up. This is one of the things that we struggled with. You remember my tale of woe at the start. This is what we struggled with at my agency, to behind the scenes, to be able to scale up. Automation should allow you to do things en masse. And then finally, responsible ownership, which is probably the least clear at the moment. But the reason we talk about responsible ownership is really, I guess it's a bit of a cliche, but we're really talking about that relationship between the human element and the technology. So technology will only do what it is programmed to do. So it's really about understanding what your challenges are, where your processes are perhaps complex, and then bringing in the automation software and the tools to work on that, not the other way around. And responsible ownership is really key when we talk about content too. So how are you deploying content, and how are you using the tools that you need to make sure you get the most out of that? So the reason I say the word should is so important, because it should enable marketers to increase ROI. It's not a given. I'm going to give you a quick example here. And this is another example from, from our business. So the picture you can see in the middle is a picture of a typical example of the content we produce for automotive retail. So it's a customer magazine that goes out, delivered to the database. That database interacts with the content, excuse me, and we track how the database is interacting, and then show this back to the client. And they love those results because it feeds into their BD work and their sales work. Pre-automation, so pre-auto insights, the tool that we talked about earlier, we would need to, once the content was delivered, log into one piece of software, export the results, and get someone in our teams, then categorize all those results, add it to a spreadsheet, make it look fairly appetizing, and then about 3 seconds before I went into a board meeting, it would be emailed to me or shared with me, and I would present it. Now, by the time I got to present it, of course, most of the data was old. So there was a disconnect between the great work we were doing in terms of the content, and the speed at which we could get the results to the client so they could use them, because there was lots of rich information there. Post automation, that lag was done in real time. So in real time, the data would get read, understood, categorized, and presented back to the client. And as I said earlier, we actually empowered the clients to go and check on the results themselves. So we almost cut ourselves out of that reporting process, which again was great in terms of capacity and resource. So I just wanted to give you a practical example of how automation can change the way you operate and free up lots of time, as long as it's on one specific process and challenge, and you've kind of ring-fenced that challenge and decided to integrate automation for that particular purpose. Where are you right now? And this is potentially quite a hard question to answer. And I haven't set up a poll for this, but I'm just keen for you to have a think about it. There's a scale that we've used from 0 to 5. So 0 being not using. So to qualify as 0, or you would have to really think and say, automation doesn't feature in any of our marketing. We don't have any automation software. None of our processes are automated. We don't really look for different ways of doing anything. We have one standard sort of route. Then there's one up from that, which is initial. So it's kind of sending emails, perhaps tracking opens, but not doing too much more, not tracking clicks potentially, and not segmenting data off the back of it and retargeting. And then we're into venturing. So you do all that initial good stuff, but actually you've been given the freedom, perhaps a little budget, to go and test tools and analyze their impact. So you could perhaps invite agencies in and watch demos and talk to businesses about how they could potentially increase efficiency within your processes across marketing. Then there's growing. And this is where, look, we've got the tools. We're able to go out and find them. We've got them on board. They're great. But there probably isn't the skill set internally to maximize that. I mean, there was a quote I read recently about the majority of people only use about 30% of their iPhone. I'm definitely fall in that category. Now, if that's the case, then that's where you are. You're in this kind of growing stage where you've got it all, but you're not necessarily maximizing it in terms of the automation. Then there's upskilling. So actually, you've got the tools, and you're in the process of learning and understanding more. And there's an appetite within the organization to learn more about it. And that's where I think the majority of people are. And then there's optimized. So actually, we've got the technology in place. Every process we analyze and we look for automation. we're going one step further. We're actually segmenting databases and bespoking that customer journey and creating this really exciting journey and fueling that journey with bespoke content and giving our customers or our potential customers a really exciting experience when they engage with the business. This is taken from Smart Insights and the automation platform Communicators research this year. And apologies, it's the other way around, so you have to kind of reverse it. But I've changed some of the terminology, but it's effectively the same. So at the top, you've got high, so number 5. So using all those features and optimizing them and probably doing some great customer journey work. And at the bottom, we've got 0. So not using marketing automation at all. It's surprising actually for me, and perhaps we can explore this a little at the end of the session, that 12% are still in that category. I would have expected that to be lower. Like any new initiative, like any new technology, and like any new idea that anyone takes to their business or that an agency presents to their business, there are blocks. And I think it's really important to understand what the barriers are to integrating automation, to adopting automation. The benefits are clear. So what are the blocks? What's stopping your business from doing that? And I want to share 4 common blocks that we see a lot with you today. And I wonder if any of these resonate. So the first is knowledge and understanding. There just isn't the understanding within our marketing team around automation. There's not the knowledge base and the experience to get the most from it. The second is probably the most frustrating and the one that we hear a lot, and I wonder if this resonates. So system integration, it's the classic block. So oh, but this won't integrate with our XYZ system that, by the way, everyone hates anyway. So there's perhaps antiquated, old-fashioned systems that have been there forever that won't integrate with some of the technology that you're keen to bring in, and that's a real classic challenge. The third is one that I buy into the most, actually. Defined strategy. We're big on strategies at GSD. We're big on roadmaps and understanding what the short and long term looks like. And in bringing in something like this, so some automation tools, requires a defined strategy. And if there isn't that defined strategy for marketing automation, the chances are it won't get included. It's not the sort of thing that perhaps could just get pushed in with a little bit of budget left at the end of the financial year. And lastly, it's resource and capacity issue. We simply don't have the resource. We simply don't have the capacity to give this a good shot. So how does high-performing content fit into this? We've looked at automation. We're going to look at some of the tools. We've looked at some of the benefits of automation, some of the things that you can, some of the ways that you can benefit from it, and your marketing function can benefit from it. But how does content play into this? What is high-performing content? Well, first of all, it's probably easier to say what high-performing content isn't, and it isn't content for content's sake. That's really crucial. So if you produce 5 or 6 pieces of content a week or a month to tick a box as part of a marketing planner, for example, that gets posted on your website, no one really looks at the results, no one really reads it, that's not high-performing content, that's just content. What we're talking about is content that truly reflects the business, truly reflects the audience, and truly reflects the vision, the value of that business. So we encourage our clients to really interrogate their client base and really ask them some tough questions to understand what drives them to work with your business. When you tear it all away, what is it that glues you together? What's the powerful messages? And with that information, you can then go and create some real high-performing content because you know it's going to resonate with your audience. All too often, we see frontline content, so content put on websites, shared on social, on email, not really resonating and reflecting the brand values and the vision of the business. And in that instance, there's clearly a disconnect between what the leadership team are saying and doing and what the frontline function, the frontline marketing team are doing, because there's a disconnect, and often it's not necessarily the marketing team's fault. They're just not being communicated that information, or the leadership team aren't buying into the value of content. And then lastly, high performing content requires some great tech and tools and software to really propel it forward. To go en masse and scale, you really need to be thinking about the tools and the software you're using, for a few reasons. And one of those reasons is for the intelligence, the data that you can get back, and the learning that you can get from sharing content. So let's go back to retail automotive and ground some of this. So achieving automation in practice. Jaguar Land Rover has a network of retailers up and down the country. Fantastic looking buildings like that one, more than 200 up and down the UK. They all represent the Jaguar and the Land Rover brand, but they tend to operate fairly independently. They're part of retail groups rather than necessarily part of Jaguar Land Rover. Centrally, Jaguar Land Rover was really keen to get a good understanding of how data was performing. So if you can imagine, you've got all these sites up and down the country sharing different content with their audiences. JLR centrally had no real handle on whether the brand was being compromised, how the brand was being represented. And he wanted to find a way to automate so it could get better results faster and really build some quick intelligence into the marketing that it was providing. So our solution was to first of all identify what high performing content was for Jaguar Land Rover and the local retailers. And part of our work revealed that the most effective way to engage local audiences with a global product is to have a rich mix of local content and global product information. So it's no good just taking Land Rover information, brand news to the local people, to the retailer. It had to be branded but done on a local level. What makes your local audience tick? It would be far too easy to simply share brand information. It's got to be localized as well. So what we were able to do was automate the customer journey with our technology. So what we did was serve the content, this rich mix of brand and local content, and that allowed us to quickly segment the database and give top level performance of that database. So if we shared, say, 4 or 5 different stories on different products, we could then say to the say centrally to JLR, this is how the databases are performing across the UK. Then also go back to the individual retailers who are our clients and say, this is where the main opportunities are for you. And in real time, we could send personalized content to that audience. So our system would literally segment a database in seconds and say, based on what they've read and based on certain trigger points, we will send personalized content to these individuals. So there could be 5 or 6 different strands of content going out at any one time, but they were going to smaller audiences. And what we noticed was engagement levels soared in that second wave of content, because you're actually giving people the information they want. It's the classic Amazon and eBay model where you look for a tent one day and the next day you're served pictures of tent pegs. It's a far more complex situation than that, but it's understanding what the audience wants and desires and then catering the content to that. So prior to that, it was just branded content. So heading away from B2C and jumping into B2B and that professional services environment for a moment, I want to give you an idea of how transferable some of this thinking and skill set and this technology is. So Savile Assessment is part of Willis Towers Watson, obviously a global business, and I suppose their their organization is slightly less complex than JLR's in many ways. But that desire to propel thought leader content and generate results off the back of that still existed. So Savile Assessment was really keen to grow its new business pipeline. And it wanted to do that by extracting all the really exciting information that was held within the business. And there were some very smart people there, very experienced people there, and they needed a vehicle to drive all that content out and into their marketplace to attract and grow their profile. So we worked with them initially consultantly, and we understood what the messages were and what the audience need was, and created I suppose a thought leader content piece, which is quite comprehensive and complex. What it enabled us to do was segment their database very quickly, so we could share that content, identify where people were in their need state, and then bespoke a journey back to Savile Assessment so they could become a client. So it was starting with some quite top level, high performing content. You can see a picture of the report there. And then in real time, segmenting the database, so via what they read, via what people read. And the database then went from, let's say, 10,000 people to categories of hundreds or thousands. And we could then retarget those people based on what they've read. It was real-time engagement, which made a huge difference. There was no lag. We got them in the moment. And it was natural retargeting. People felt like they were on this seamless journey, and they were simply reading information and then being shared information relevant to that, relevant to their need. You know, if you take the automation out of that, the business is simply pushing content for content's sake. There must be a way of understanding the value of content. And again, that kind of reflects that relationship with content, high performing content and automation. It's about, yes, it's got to be high performing, but you need to understand how it's performing too, so you can keep bettering it. As we mentioned earlier, this is this sort of marketing automation industry is a multi-billion-dollar space, and it's growing. And there are many tools and options that are available to you. And I hope, if you're not already looking into this, that after this you will start exploring some of those options. So I want to just take 3 tools that we use and explain a little more about them and what you can perhaps kick out of your normal everyday operation with these particular tools. The first is an email marketing platform called CampaignMonitor. The second is ours. It would be unfair of me not to mention ours. Auto Insights, which is part of our swarm methodology. And then finally, there's HubSpot, which I'm sure you'll all have heard of. Now, HubSpot is a huge player in the marketing automation space, and it does a massive amount, and it's ever growing. And I could literally spend the whole of this 45 minutes talking about what HubSpot's capable of. But I guess it's probably more useful for me to tell you how we use it and some of the capabilities that you might find useful. So some of the things you can kick out when you use HubSpot are Excel spreadsheets for databases. We still see businesses do this. They still use spreadsheets that are saved on desktops and online folders for databases, which is not good practice. It's not particularly safe. So, you know, a system like HubSpot, where you can utilize that CRM capability, is really perfect for that. So you can onboard the data, you can store it safely, you can start to manage your pipeline. So useful for BD teams, definitely, but also useful for marketing, because you can see how people have dropped into your pipeline. HubSpot's great at looking back over email conversations and marketing activity that's been sent and keeping everything all in one place. So you can track back and start building what they call deal boards. And you no longer need these manual pipelines. HubSpot's really intuitive. So I would definitely recommend looking into that. It's a vast space, so make sure you don't bite off more than you can chew. But the good thing is you can grow with it. CampaignMonitor is an email marketing tool. One of the things by adopting a CampaignMonitor. I mean, CampaignMonitor is one of many, of course. It's one that we use. We think it's probably one of the easiest to use and offers the most at a fairly basic level. But one thing you can kick out when you use a system like CampaignMonitor is sending mass email via Outlook. And again, we still see businesses do this, sending email via Outlook. And you get no reporting on that, no intelligence, no way of building stronger campaigns by benchmarking. There's a lot of guesswork involved there. It also has some good templates that you can use. So you can stop using unexciting, boring templates if you are using templates and adopt some more exciting ones. So perhaps increase engagement on your email campaigns. You can still personalize messages and you can see in real time where people are opening. And like I say, what's really important is that you can start to benchmark quickly what's working and what isn't working. And then there's our platform, Auto Insights. Auto Insights sits within our Swarm platform, and it really signals the end to impersonal content marketing, poorly organized databases and manual pipelines. What we try to do with Auto Insights, and we're constantly updating it and changing it, what we've tried to do is help businesses create customer journeys, and if you can automate that customer journey with high performing content, you will drive success. There's lots of businesses doing bits of that. So lots of businesses are sending content out on a regular basis with no real feedback, no real understanding of what good looks like. Auto Insights enables you to very, very quickly in real time see what's working, where your database is swarming to in terms of your content, and you can access results instantly. We've set up a number of features that are quite useful as well. So if you create a customer journey which starts with content and ends perhaps with an invitation to a webinar or invitation to a conversation with someone in the sales team, that's a fairly typical journey. You can actually set up email alerts. So instead of having to dive into the platform every day, you get notified when that happens. And certainly the BD teams we've worked with have found that really useful. I trained and worked as a journalist before I got into the content marketing game. And the first magazine I ever worked on had a policy that each feature we wrote had to end with a box out, so a little sort of bit of content that was entitled, "If you read nothing else, read this." And I couldn't really see the point in it, to be honest. But year on year, whenever we surveyed readers, everyone absolutely loved it. They loved this opportunity to get a recap of what had been written about. And we were never sure whether this was because people didn't actually read any of the content, they just wanted the recap, or whether they were genuinely interested in it. So this is my version of that. So if you've been out watering the garden or making lunch, this is the point to listen up. So what you need to know, and some of the big takeaways from here hopefully are, look, this is a huge industry for a reason. There's a huge amount of opportunity to automate the processes that you are adopting within your marketing team. You can be faster, smarter, and more efficient, of course, with the content that you produce. But it's really important to think responsibly and connect your processes and the content that you're creating to the values and the vision of the business. You need to merge that human element with automation tools. I would ask, do you know what high performing content looks like? And one of the key things I'd really like people to take away from this is, what does that look like? Do we produce high performing content? And I'd love to talk with you about that a little more. Are you able to quickly qualify in and qualify out what high performing content looks like for your business? So many tools are off the shelf. Everything can be automated. Nearly everything can be automated. And so many tools are off the shelf. I would ask, is it right for you? I would really think about what you want the automation to do for you rather than the other way around. Because with most of these tools, you can grow with it. So start small, and grow with it. And one thing I wanted to invite was, of course, some questions. I'll hand back to Rachel in a sec. But another thing that I was permitted to talk to you about today was our content sessions that we've been running since lockdown. It's been a really interesting period for content and communications, and it's enabled us to talk with lots of clients, but also lots of other businesses that we're not working with necessarily, about what content and communication looks like during lockdown and what it might look like post COVID. We're delving into your current approach, sharing best practice, being a bit of a sounding board, identifying where tech and automation might be able to play an important role, and perhaps doing some of the stuff that we've talked about in the session today. So if you'd like that, if you'd like to have a session with us, they last about 30-40 minutes to begin with, and you get a concise recommendations report afterwards. I'm happy to open that up to people and offer that out.
Right. Nick, and thank you. And I know you're grappling with hay fever as well, and could hear at points when you were sort of suffering. So thank you for persevering and fighting through. A really helpful session, and I think we've not had many questions or any questions come at this point, but hopefully that's a sign that you've covered a lot of the sort of key things that were on people's mind. But I've got a couple of questions here, Nick, so I'll kick off, and if you do think of anything as we're just having this Q&A, please do add a question to the bottom of the site and I'll pick those up. So you've obviously spoke a lot, Nick, around content and high-performing content, but how do you identify what that high-performing content might look like or does look like?
Yeah, it's fair question. I mean, it's a fairly complex issue, and there's lots of different ways of doing it. One of the most important elements of high-performing content, as I touched on, is understanding what the vision and the values of the business are, and seeing how that then carries through to frontline content. And if you can honestly say that the content you produce totally resonates with what the business is famous for, then that's fine. The majority of the time it doesn't. So your content won't be high performing until you tick that box. And that's a tricky box to tick, because it usually involves going back to the leadership team and asking them to be involved in some of the content production. But it's not necessarily asking for their approval for every piece of content that's created. It's more about creating a central hub, a central point that defines what high performing content looks like for your business. So it's like a true north. So it could be a list of words and phrases, and it could be just anything really that enables everyone to sort of look back and say, we've created this, it ticks these 5 boxes. So for us, for our business, that's high performing. There's obviously metrics as well, that there should be a scientific approach to it, but as a starting point, I would evaluate, look at the last 10 pieces of content you created, in whichever form they took, and look back and say, is this in line with what we're famous for? I always wonder how businesses can talk authentically and genuinely if they're not talking about what they're famous for. We're famous for content creation and the tech and the tools that are involved in getting the most out of that content. I couldn't come on here and talk passionately about a lot of other things. So there must be that connection between the values and the vision of the business and the content that's created. But it's a complex issue, and I'm happy to dive into it with people if they want me to.
Okay, no, thank you. That's great, Nick. So we're starting to get a couple of questions in, so mindful of the time. So I'll move on to the first question, which is coming from Lorraine Lung. And she's asking, much of marketing automation is actually about the products and tools. So it sounds like a lot of what's involved is more planning and strategy, and it's even more important than tech. So is that, the planning and strategy piece, do you feel that it's more important than the tech itself?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there's so much technology out there, and some of the technology is hugely vast, like HubSpot, and some of it's quite bespoke and surgical, a bit like the one that we've produced. So I definitely think that Lorraine is right. That there needs to be an understanding of what your own processes are to identify the right technology for you. So that should be your defined strategy. So, for example, we want to get slicker and faster at producing content on a weekly or monthly basis. our current process is this, write it down. How can we bring in automation tools to speed that up? Now, you might bring in a tool that you only use 10% of in the first case, but as long as it's aligned with what you need it to do, that's okay. Planning, yes, 100%. We're big on planning and strategy. And one of the blocks we talked about was not having that defined strategy. Without the defined strategy, it won't happen. So yeah, definitely about planning, but also understanding where your challenges lie. So you might not have even considered the complexity of some of the processes that you go through to generate content or to get a marketing campaign out, etc., etc. It's worth looking back and really studying that, and then exploring the automation tools and software that can support that.
Brilliant, Nick. Thank you, and I hope that answers your question, Lorraine. Moving on to the next one. So, Paddy, great to have you on with us today. So, Paddy's question is around cultural barriers, or how do you overcome the cultural barriers to new tech, especially with the traditional sales teams, or perhaps even sort of stakeholders who are less open to sort of technology and embracing that?
Yeah, well, I guess it's related to that classic barrier. You know, this isn't how we do things around here. We've got our existing infrastructure in place. Let's not change it. And there's people sort of ripping their hair out, saying, "Well, we can do things 10 times faster. This is ridiculous." Cultural barriers are tricky. One of the things that a lot of automation software will enable you to do is go bit by bit. So it doesn't have to be a huge overhaul. There can be a roadmap. So, and often a lot of these programs, the software that you integrate is free to begin with as well. So I suppose it's about managing those naysayers, managing those difficult individuals, and saying, look, we're not saying we're going to change everything overnight. What we're saying is we're going to step into it. And the great thing about tech and the great thing about automation software is that you can measure it. So as soon as you're into that cycle, you can start to see results. It's a very different conversation when you go back and say, look, we've tried this for 2 months or 1 month. These are the results we're getting. To, can we bring in this new concept? So I would say, yes, I agree with you, Paddy. There are huge issues around cultural barriers, especially with complex and traditional businesses. Getting over them requires a step-by-step approach, and probably showing value all the way along. But you know, good agencies should help you with that as well, if they're supporting the integration of that platform.
Definitely. I think to that point, Nick, so then if you think about perhaps some of the cases where you have worked with some of your clients, where you've seen effective sort of implementation, who has been involved in that sort of process, that decision-making piece? I imagine it's multiple people, but again, it'd be good if you could just talk around, some of those key roles that need to be part of those early conversations.
I think, yeah, it's a good point, and it's an important point. I think one of the good things about our approach, and when I say good, I mean in terms of answering that question, is that the initial stage is often about creating content. So something that the business will share and deliver and be proud of. And we work pretty hard, and marketing teams as well, at getting buy-in from the senior leadership team at that point, because we kind of need their input. We need them to tell us that this is in line with the vision and the values of the business. So in that instance, in that period of time, we're getting that senior level buy-in. Now, when it comes to actually implementing, reporting, the day-to-day running, we work far closer with marketing teams and BD teams, and they're the really crucial people to get the most value out of this. It's then about equipping them with the information they need to report back to the boardroom and say, you know, this is what we've been doing, and these are the results we're managing to get. This is the return on investment. But the team that we work with and that we have worked with is broad. It takes Savile assessment. We in that initial, what we would call a discovery session, where we go in and unearth all those sort of exciting topics that we can cover from a content perspective. We had the CEO of the business, we had the head of marketing, we had a head of BD, and we had a team of consultants. It's a bit of a all hands approach at the start, but you've got to sell it in the right way. I think you've got to really get those individuals emotionally involved at the start. That's really important.
Brilliant. And I hope that answers your question, Freddie, and touches on your question there as well, James. Just to finish off on the questions, Nick, this is from Ange Brown, actually one of the Northwest Committee. So hi, Ange, nice to have you on today. Her question's around, obviously, businesses are finding themselves quite cash and resource constrained at the moment, and I think that's an ongoing sort of challenge. Most firms find themselves in at different points. But how can you convince stakeholders to invest in something like this?
Yeah, thanks, Ange, for that. That's it's a pretty unique time, isn't it? It's the typical challenge. You know, we don't want to spend any money, but we're showing you a way where you can save money down the line. I suppose, like I said before, there are opportunities to automate processes without spending any money, and there's lots of opportunities to trial different bits of software and implement these small little bits of technology that will hopefully deliver results before it actually requires any spend. Other than that, there's obviously case studies and evidence-based cases that you can take to the stakeholders. I'm hoping that this whole period of time pushes us into a very different space in terms of digital and tech. It feels like it is. We're talking to businesses all the time, and they're saying that there's suddenly an awareness of the value of tech like never before. There's an openness to discuss it. So Ange, I hope that actually that we're not walking into the same business world that we left a couple of months ago. I hope there's a bit more openness and a bit more acceptance around what some of these tools can deliver. And you know what, they're gonna have to, if teams are being, if resources are being cut and teams are being reduced. You know, you look back at the Industrial Revolution picture I showed you earlier. This is how businesses are going to have to operate. They're going to have to find ways of being slicker and faster and better, and that's kind of sink or swim time. And these aren't a nice to have anymore. These are fundamental to support businesses moving out of this whole period of time, I believe.
Definitely. No, thanks, Nick. That's been great, and we're almost at time. So a huge thank you to you today for pulling together this session, because I know you've been really busy the last couple of months. I really appreciate your time today and pulling this together. Before you do dial off, everybody, just a couple of things to flag. So obviously this session has been recorded, so we'll circulate a link tomorrow of the recording and also the slides. And as Nick has kindly sort of offered, if you do want to have a one-to-one session or consultation with one of either Nick or one of the team, then do get in touch. He'll be happy to hear from you. There will be a feedback form or link appearing shortly on the screen, so would encourage you just to take a couple of minutes to complete the form. We really value hearing from you in terms of what content is sort of interest, how today's session has gone for you, if it's answered some of the questions you've had. So please do spare a couple of minutes to share that insight with us. We've got a number of sessions coming up in June, and you will be able to find these on the website next week. The first session is the 3rd of June, and that's going to be on client experience and digitalisation, the client experience. On the 4th of June, there's going to be a session which Passel are joining us for, around staying close to clients. And then the Northwest team again are hosting another session towards the end of June, and that's going to be with Deborah Ogden, and that's going to be around improving your personal brand and impact, particularly when you're having to work in a more virtual world that you're perhaps used to. So do look out for those events, share the details with your colleagues. All of the sessions that we've held from the PM Forum perspective over the last month are all available on the website, so do share those around. I know some teams have been sharing with their fee earning clients teams, and they found some of those sessions really useful. So do share far and wide within your organisations. If you have got any ideas, as I say, so put the sort of topic suggestions in the feedback form, or do reach out to one of your or to your regional chair and share any ideas you've got. But I think all that leaves me to say a big thank you again, Nick. If you were in one of our actual sessions, there would have been a rapturous applause. So a big thanks for your time again. And thank you all, and stay safe. We'll see you in June.